Hi, I'm indie fantasy author Melinda Kucsera, and in this episode of Fantasy Lore and More, Kel E Fox is joining me to talk about her book, Darkhaven. So I've already got some questions about that. What is this Darkhaven? Welcome, Kel.
Hello, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Oops. I accidentally did something. Oh, there we go. The show notes disappeared for a second. I was like, no, I'm just resizing the screen because I forgot to do that during all the technical issues we had for the hot minute before we started. And I was like, I forgot the name of the book we're talking about for a moment, but it's all right. Anyways, welcome.
Very good.
We're just having all the issues today.
It's one of those days.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about Darkhaven.
So Darkhaven is my first book in a series called The Lightless Prophecy, and it started life as a short story, and now it is a saga of 6 books and several novellas, 3 of which are published. So
wow.
The series starts young adult, sort of contemporary urban fantasy with some sci-fi vibes. I call it fantasy. It's much more fantasy. If you give it to a sci-fi fan, they're going to be like, what is this? Like, it's all made up. But it has that little kind of feel of superhuman sort of genetic engineering kind of sci-fi element in it. So there's that. And then it morphs through the series by book 3, and certainly going into book 4, the series becomes a bit more magical space opera. So
oh wow,
there we go.
And how does so I guess it moves through time and we get spaceships and stuff. Like, how does that?
Magic spaceships. So they already exist, and the whole premise of it really is that Earth. So the main character is Gabby Whitehall, and she is 17, finishing high school in Australia, and is kind of going, oh my goodness, what am I going to do with my life? Like, not that she particularly loved high school, but she's just frozen in this state of don't know what to do next. Her best friends both have kind of very clear career goals, and she doesn't have any, and so she's a bit sort of terrified of, she's going to walk out of school at the end of the last day and kind of into a void. It's her feeling, I suppose. And her kind of want always in life has been that she wishes magic was real, and it turns out as the series progresses that actually it might be, and it does exist on other planets in the galaxy, but just Earth does not have it for some reason that we will find out why.
Oh wow.
So magic is what powers the space travel for other civilizations.
That's pretty neat. So not science, math is not the universal language in your world. It's magic.
It's an emotion-powered magic.
Oh, how does that work?
So there's a couple of magic systems as it goes on, because it just keeps expanding. I don't know how this happens, but
I know how it happens.
Yeah, the main sort of system that this deals with has 4 branches. It has 5 branches, but one of them is theoretical and no one believes it really exists. And so there are 4 branches to it, and one of them is called V magic, and it uses space and time energy as to power, and that allows people to travel very rapidly almost instantaneously through vast distances in space. And then there are 3 other areas to the magic system, one of which is also a physical kind of thing. It deals with making physical objects sort of either more flexible or stronger, or changing their kind of properties. And then there are 2 emotion-based ones, and they work in opposites. So one is kind of fear and compassion-based, and the other is love and grief-based. And they can create different effects with memory and illusion and healing and all sorts of things with those. So
you power a starship with
really
emotion.
Well, it's
what if you get mad in the middle of the flight? Does the ship stop, or does it is that like hitting the gas?
I think there's a line like that somewhere in the 3rd book. I can't remember now. It was like, don't ever do something when you're angry. Like, it was some specific thing that this character had just kind of leveled up, and they're like, they kind of get this dire warning of, don't go there if you're mad kind of thing. But Yeah, it's so the space travel is more of a physical magic, I suppose. It's still, yeah, there's different
Gotcha.
branches of it, and some of them are more emotion based and some of them are more, there's still a feeling associated. So for the space flight magic, it's a thrill feeling, like adrenaline powered sort of feeling. But yeah, it is really just moving through space very rapidly, and it's magic. They don't entirely know exactly what the very kind of core of it is. Just that it does work if they train it. So
That's pretty cool. There's been a upsurge, is that even the right word? Increase in books about like that are more not they're like sci-fi vibes but powered by magic, which like I said, sci fantasy. I've been seeing more of them, and like it's interesting how we're and I guess like a lot of sci-fi is fantasy because we don't really know how you're gonna move faster than light.
that's it.
You
It's an
know?
extrapolation, I suppose, but you get to a point where you're very much in fantasy realms with that. And I also remember readings like the Rift War saga, which was kind of very much high fantasy, but also multiple worlds and planets and travel between them. So or characters were able to move. It was a very long time ago. I don't remember exactly how he moves, but he did. So it's
Well, teleporting, on Star Trek is kind of like building a magical portal. Nobody knows how that works either.
yeah, I remember seeing someone we're talking somewhere about Doctor Who, and someone's like, yes, no one really wants to admit that the sonic screwdriver is actually a magic wand.
It looks like one.
Some of the things it
if
does.
You stare at it.
Yeah.
You can't fit all. Well, I guess with the chips getting smaller, maybe you could fit, many mechanical devices in there that produce different effects. Maybe.
It's possible.
Maybe. Yeah. So let's get back to Gabby.
Yes. Yeah.
So in Gabby's world, so it's contemporary fantasy. So it's our world.
It's our world.
Space race.
So our world has no idea that other civilizations exist. It pretty much starts out quite realistic urban setting.
Okay, so they're not racing to get to Mars and the moon.
No,
because other countries are doing it. So why not? Let's do it too. Which seems to me what the space race boils down to since the 1960s. Well, we can't let them get there first. We need to go put our flag on Mars, whether that's a good idea or not.
Questionable. Yeah. So Gabby's leaving high school, or she's in her final year, so she's got a year left to kind of figure out what to do, and is needing an epiphany, and goes out for a walk in a thunderstorm, which is a questionable life choice, but she does it, and she gets literally struck by lightning. And that triggers a kind of series of events that she had no idea about, but has been kind of coming for her for a long time. I don't really know how much of that I should get into without giving away spoilers, but
that's up to you. I mean, I want all the spoilers.
I love hearing spoilers sometimes. Like sometimes you just hear something like, wow, I have to read how that plays out. But
the first book is, its whole existence is to be a spoiler to get people to, because if you don't read the first book, which is the gateway to the rest of the series, you won't read the rest of the series. Exactly. That's my personal opinion. So I will tell you all sorts of spoilers about my first books.
All right. Well, let's move into spoiler land then. So she finds out that as an infant, she was subjected to a genetic experiment, a magical genetic experiment, but they don't know it's magic. They think it's science, and it's sort of, they can't really explain it. It has an effect that they can measure and reproduce and so forth, and they figure there must be some explanation for it. But basically it creates this change in her that it just needs an enormous energy catalyst to take effect. And this is, like I said, very loose sci-fi vibe.
Oh wow. How did they convince her parents this was a good idea, or did the parents not know?
Her parents are extremely unethical, and they were running the experiments.
Oh, well then, that's one way to get parental consent.
Here's a child. Let's just put it in the pool. Yeah.
We don't have permission to use other people's kids, but look at that. We have kids ourselves, so we should use them. So what if they grow a third eye?
Yeah. So it's basically what happens if your parents were the evil overlords.
That would be an
of
interesting book.
So she has no idea. All this time she thought her mother was dead because she grew up with her father, and actually her mother was there was a fire in the lab when she was a very small child, and her father escaped with her and let her believe that her mother died. But there's a whole kind of story to that too, in that they were both in on this secret experiment that has made her then gain powers when she is struck by lightning. So
I'm guessing if they in later books there's magic powered spaceships, that many other people are either subjected to the same thing or gain magical powers by getting struck by lightning or some other method.
So there are other people in her situation because she wasn't the only child in the cohort, and she finds that, and so some of those have kind of broken away from it and gone, this was a horribly wrong thing. We're not going to support this continued work, but they obviously still need to look after themselves and any others who kind of got caught up in it as these sort of children are growing up and having their events happen. So there's this rogue organization called Darkhaven.
So that's where the name comes from.
That's where the name comes from, and they pick her up, and sort of there's a car chase between some agents from this secret task force who are trying to catch all these event children who so that it doesn't ever get out, because it was, this experiment was never supposed to happen. It was an off-book sort of thing. And Darkhaven are kind of trying to help her and support her. And meanwhile, this other task force are trying to eliminate her so she's not another loose end of an experiment that went badly. So,
what's the other organization called?
It's just the task force.
Oh, it doesn't have, okay.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. They don't actually know at this stage what it's a very small piece of a much bigger puzzle as the series progresses.
I see.
In the first book, they don't know who is behind it, really.
They just know it's the task force, which is kind of cool. Like, it's having such a generic name, it can kind of be scarier than having.
I think so.
I because like if you like Darkhaven, you get that gives you some information about what it is. Haven is a safe place. Dark, they're underground. Exactly. They're trying to keep you out of sight. Like, you can draw some information from that name. And something called the task force is so bland that you don't. There's all is that it's not just the people that you're seeing that are chasing you. There are other people behind them, and that's all you can draw from the title. You don't know what its mission is, what it's trying to do. Because names can give you an idea of locality or something. Like Darkhaven gives you, you're assuming if they're dark, they're operating underneath the radar. But I think that could be scarier, having a generic name like that. So
I think that was that. So sometimes I kind of, with naming in general, really, I'm sort of looking at it and going, what would be a cool name? And sometimes I sit on it for ages and then just go, you know what? The simplest thing is often the best thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be something over the top or really explicit. And like you say, sometimes that adds to the mystery. So,
and they may know it as the task force, Gabby and the people that in Darkhaven, but the task force itself may have its own name for itself that they wouldn't know unless they were told, because they obviously have to recruit other people to work for the task force. So there's probably there's probably some cool acronym that helps them get people to sign up and be like, I want to be part of this, whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a bit of, it is an unknown force that I kind of left loose so that it could grow, I suppose, into the villain opportunities there are many.
I mean, it's a task force, so it's like that Hydra. You get rid of one person from a task force, you don't know how many more are behind them.
Yeah.
You don't know
really
how many.
At the top.
That's it, and you don't know how many people knew where this person was going, what they were intending to do, what their mission was. So, and when they're supposed to report back. So you don't know how long a time you get once you eliminate them or escape them or whatever before they're going to report to someone else, and someone else will come after you. So it's definitely a shady, shadowy situation there, which is probably the worst. You're in high school and now need to run for your life.
Yeah, and you're facing these sort of developing powers that are overwhelming and frightening, and sort of who to trust. A lot of that kind of thing. Basically, she just keeps having decisions thrown at her, like, can I trust these people? Can I trust these people? What am I going to do about getting these new powers because she has a choice around that, and on it goes when she's the most decision averse character ever. So it just kind of makes life really hard for her in that she was agonizing over this. I don't know what course to pick to study after school, and now it's like I don't know if the next decision I make is going to kind of be the life or death. So it's quite a frightening time when you put it that way. But she maintains fairly good spirits, I think, by eating lots of chocolate. So
well, I mean, chocolate is a good way to keep up your morale. Yeah. And I know it's set largely in Australia, which is where you're from, which is very cool. I like that when books are not set in the US because it's nice to read about like people living in other places of the world having magical things. That it's not exclusively ours. That it's that other people around the world can have magic too. I don't know why. I enjoy that. I hope other readers do too. Do you want to go? I know you wanted to read an excerpt. Do you want to get to that now?
Of course.
So we can hear Gabby.
So the excerpt I've decided to read is not the first chapter, because I would describe the book as probably medium paced. It's not super fast, so it doesn't start with a great big bang. It's sort of life in Gabby's life, which is high school and friend drama and so forth. But this particular passage is kind of there's a character who shows up who I did not plan at all when I wrote this story, and his appearance is sort of what catapulted the whole series into being much longer than the planned one book, and then also bigger than an urban fantasy. So there is an acronym that I use. It's TISC, TISC, and it stands for Tertiary Institutions Service Centre, which is basically just it's the organisation Gabby has to submit her university choices to. So she's terrified of them. It's not explicit language. It's just, is there any language restriction would you like me to avoid? They're not like explicitly terrible words, just
No. I'll double check the for YouTube. No, I just say it's not for kids, and we're good. For Spotify, I'll just double check their guidelines again, and if it's falls within, I'll just tick the box to say it's whatchamacallit. Whatever that, I can't think of the word. That's it.
Yeah. There's no F or C bombs, so
then it's fine. Then it's totally fine.
There are some in the books, but not in this section. So anyone who's looking to read, if you are particularly concerned about that. So Gabby is at school at the moment. 10 minutes before the end of last period, a runner came in with a note summoning me to the deputy principal's office. I told the receptionist my name and waited in the corner next to a drooping potted fern and an old sofa that looked too hard for anyone's butt, trying not to read the career advice posters in abundant display on the wall. My eyes had just settled on a lackluster advertisement about the school's drama production when a guy's voice sounded behind me. Don't go. It wasn't just a voice. It was the sound of oil spreading over velvet, water thundering over a cliff. But voices didn't sound like that, at least not that I'd ever heard. I turned. He was roughly my age, and all lanky limbs, with alarmingly scruffy black hair. He lounged on the rock-hard sofa as if he lived there, in black sand shoes, casually on-purpose ripped black jeans, and a white T-shirt. A delicate silver chain hung around his neck, disappearing under his shirt. He was wearing sunglasses, the black wraparound kind with mirrored lenses, so I could only see myself in them. "Hello," he said, in that voice. I could feel his gaze on me, even through the dark lenses. What?" I sputtered. He broke the gaze, looking down at the corner of the couch where a thread was torn loose. "Sorry," he said. Now he sounded normal. "The play, it's terrible. Trust me, I saw the rehearsal." He looked back up. Something was different about him from a moment ago, but I couldn't pick it. "Right," I drew the word out. "Well, I wasn't going. I was not looking at career posters? I started. How had he known that? I glanced over the array of "Be at the cutting edge of biotech" and "Do you have what it takes to lead a team?" posters and shrugged, trying to sound as casual as his jeans looked. I just wish I could meet God or whoever it is up there and they could tell me what the hell I'm supposed to be doing. He looked at me, sunglasses still on. Do you really wish you could meet this God of yours? I turned away from his intensity. I don't really believe in God. I'm here to see Mr. Cantwell. The strange boy chuckled. That's probably about as close as most people get to the God of careers. I didn't get it, and I was miffed at his familiarity. How do you know I wasn't reading career posters anyway? His long fingers picked absently at the loose thread in the couch. Lucky guess. And you know, there's about 20 of them, and you're deliberately staring at that one very dull drama PSA. Mr. Cantwell opened his door and waved me in. Nice chatting, the boy said, stretching his arms overhead and sticking his legs out like this was his living room or something. Whatever, I muttered. I stepped over his feet, my toe catching the edge of his shoe. The boy grinned. Mr. Cantwell returned to his office chair and motioned for me to sit. He was a tall, angular man with a face full of features competing for dominance, prominent chin, long nose, and dark, bushy eyebrows. He was gruff and blunt and feared by most of the school, but under the suit and tie and stiff exterior, he genuinely cared about the plights of indecisive students. Ah, Gabby, I thought I'd see how you were doing with your university choices. I gave him a "how do you think" look. We were familiar enough, and plopped into one of the chairs in front of his desk. You've been in here every semester since you had to choose your Year 9 electives, trying to change your subjects. It was true. I folded my arms, trying not to betray my internal anguish. I don't think I can get this right. He leaned back in his chair. Did you meet with the career counsellor? I nodded. Fat lot of use that had been. The woman had looked at my records, then looked at me and asked if I had thought about having a baby. I'd walked out without a word. Mr. Cantwell steepled his fingers and regarded me over his reading glasses. It's not about getting it right. Consider that a university degree isn't for everyone. I'm not saying you don't have the academic skill, you definitely do, but it isn't your only option. Just keep that in mind. What else should I do? Stupidly, I felt like crying. I pushed the feeling down and gritted my teeth. Well, I would suggest a gap year. Take some of the pressure off. My daughter took a year off, travelled a bit, worked, and she said it gave her a different perspective. Or you can look at other options, if vocational training appeals more to your interests. I slumped. Degrees, vocational training, gap years, nothing felt right. But I still have to apply somewhere now. I need an epiphany. My voice cracked. Damn it. Mr. Cantwell smiled. Gabby, sometimes in life you just have to make a decision. An alarm beeped from his wrist. If you need anything, just let me know, he offered, silencing the alarm as he stood to open the door. I smiled and thanked him, not meeting his eyes, in case he saw mine about to water, and hurried out of the room. The strange boy was gone. That's that end of that passage.
So she was going, well, I guess it's convenient that she decided to take a gap year, but before all this happened. So there's no payments to universities that'll be made or promises to show up.
No, she dodges that.
Or people looking for her as to why she didn't show up to university. So that,
I don't know what happens if you just don't show. They come looking.
Yeah, I think they like contact because you have
Maybe.
to. Well, I don't know how it is in Australia, but in the US, most universities you have to pay to attend, and I don't know if they can recognize that as income if you don't show up.
True. So they want that bum in that seat, don't they?
Yeah, like I don't know in college. I know in like high school and middle and all, the younger grades, the schools get reimbursed, and if so, they have an active vested interest in you showing up to school. I don't know I don't think, maybe like a state school or like a public school, public university might get some funding from the government and might have a vested interest in your backside being in that seat if it's supposed to be. I'm not sure how that works exactly, but it's good that she took a gap year and didn't have to worry about that.
Yes.
That's one less complication in a complicated life that this poor girl has.
Yeah.
So so it's only these people who are part of this experiment who have magic, or does it come back and other people get it too? Like,
That's the big question of the series, really.
Okay. So we got to read the series to find out.
At this stage, only the people who have had the experiment, and there are a few others from slightly different, similar experiments, but different sort of groups. But yeah, it's a pretty small, limited number of people at this stage. But the strange boy she met in the office was not one of the cohorts. He is something else entirely, and he's the link to another world. So,
oh wow! So he's from somewhere else, possibly.
He is. I feel like I want to give another spoiler away, just because it's fun to talk about.
You accept all spoilers.
It's early. You find out fairly early in the book what he is. So he calls himself the god of lightning, which obviously there's some implications there because she's struck by lightning and, he was in town. So what was that about?
Is there a connection?
Well, yeah. So they kind of dance around that for quite some time before, he kind of owns up to what might have happened. And it's quite a cute story for him. It was entirely an accident, but he sort of calls himself the god of lightning, technically the god of weather, but that's not as cool. So but he's one of many in a group of, essentially they're not gods as such, but they are kind of much more powerful magicians, really, from other worlds that essentially humans would probably see as some sort of godlike entity. So.
And claiming they're gods feeds the ego. So.
Yeah, in his case, that's exactly what's happening. It was kind of fun in the terms of he sort of shows up, and some of his behavior is a little bit kind of, that's not really cool, but Gabby calls him on it, so that was fun to write.
Oh wow, that's cool. I mean, that's cool though that he's saying that he's calling himself a god and he's actually from another world. That's pretty neat. Like, I like that. Are we gonna get to go to his world and find out is he like the lowest man on the totem pole, like power wise? And that's why he came to Earth, where he can be like, me powerful, you weak human.
Yeah, he's part of a group that is kind of keeps an eye on Earth, and yeah, he is definitely the lowest member of that particular organization and has a chip on his shoulder about the fact that he's too young for the job, but also doesn't get any respect.
So what are they keeping an eye on Earth for? And make sure nobody messes with it?
They were kind of involved in building it in a way. Or shaping it, rather. I
was going to say, how do you build an Earth?
Yeah, well...
magical Legos?
Maybe. I'm not entirely sure if there aren't sort of worlds in this universe, in the broader sort of scope of it, that humans might not have kind of just constructed out there. But yeah, this is a matter of they kind of come along and shape the planet, I suppose. And they, in this kind of, in the world building, they are technically, I guess, ancestors of humans. Yeah.
So we can blame the Bermuda Triangle and all its weirdness on them?
Absolutely. It was quite possibly the god of lightning just, getting into an argument with his sister. I don't know.
Who's his sister? He
has a sister. She doesn't really show up much in this story. You sort of meet her much later on. So,
and what is her power?
Geology.
Ah.
I have not hugely explored her role, like her power. Her role in the story doesn't have a lot to do with what she does on Earth. So, it's basically she's sort of has a great hand in the geological aspects of it, and that is all we really know.
Oh, wow. So does she find out about how this Darkhaven organization came to be and who's leading it, or is she kept in the dark about that too? And just
Gabby.
yeah,
Yeah, she does find out. So that's sort of part of when she's faced with her choice of, is she going to stay with them? She kind of starts demanding answers, which is fair enough. And she does get them. So,
okay.
yeah.
So you all right? So in your blurb says there's something about a lightless prophecy.
Yes, well, that's the series title.
Oh,
And
that's okay.
So that came about. So originally this was a short story, which I can't write short stories to save myself, but I think I've
Yeah,
managed.
same.
I think I've managed one by accident once, but that's why it has this sci-fi vibe, is because the short story was sci-fi, because it was a short story. I don't mind tackling sci-fi for a short piece. And then I went, and basically everyone who read it was like, really like the ideas, but really feel like this is an outline for a novel rather than a short story. And so I was like, right, well, I'll turn it into a novel and it'll just be one novel. But then the God of Lightning shows up, Charon, and he kind of, about at some point through the story, I kind of had this realization about him, which I hadn't planned at all. And I was like, oh, that's a giant plot hole. And went, well, okay, how am I going to fix that? And basically he had to have known about Gabby long before. It wasn't an accident that they met, basically. And that's what the prophecy deals with. To some extent. It's bigger than them, but they are part of it. And yeah, it's really hard to explain some of this without giving a whole lot away.
We're just enjoying the struggle.
The prophecy is something of a mystery, and like uncovering what it is and what it means is a large part of the series plot. So, but yeah,
Okay.
it's essentially kind of end of the universe stakes, and by the end, and how these people are going to save it. And I also wanted to twist the chosen one a little bit, in the sense of somehow they choose themselves for the job, so that comes into it at some point.
I feel like that's a part of the chosen one trope, that like because at some point the chosen one has to accept that they are chosen, and when they do that, then they are choosing to take on this job, this role, and all that it entails, and become an active participant, not the plaything of fate.
Yes.
I write about the chosen one too, so that's why I'm like,
well,
I have thought a lot about this. That at a certain point, they have, it becomes obvious that there's no escaping this. You can either choose to go along on your own and have an active role in making decisions, in shaping your fate, or you can just let the winds of fate blow you wherever it wants to, and then you have no control over anything, and that isn't fun.
And you probably won't succeed,
No,
not being decisive and making plans and taking actions. So I think also, when you're writing a story with central characters, the chosen one is almost inescapable, because obviously the main character is the one who has chosen to step up and do this task. And it's like, maybe there was something that kind of pushed them into it that makes it look a little bit more like it was foretold, but ultimately they choose to go on this path, like you say. So, and then that's the person that the story follows.
I mean, that's true. That's entirely true, because sometimes the chosen one can take their mission in different directions.
They certainly do that. So.
Because sometimes it's the thing that they need to do is not clear to them. They may know pieces of it, and so then it's kind of open to interpretation until you figure out what the thing is.
Yeah, which is, I think that's probably a large part of the underlying plot for the Lightless Prophecy series. It's a person who feels that they must fulfill this prophecy somehow, trying to figure out what it actually means to do that.
Yeah, and
it's
if somebody's like 1,000 years ago is trying to prophesy, like from visions that they're seeing, like the language that they're using to describe things may not be what you would use as you're looking at it, and you're like, well, that's not, I don't see how you got that from this. When you finally work it out, you're like, how in the world did you come up with that from this?
There's so many ways it could go wrong, like mistranslations, or just there not being the language at the time, or things having different meanings in terms of what kind of tasks, even if it says that you must go do this, well, that might have some completely different connotations thousands of years down the track. So, or in a different world, even like this is a prophecy that's come from another planet somewhere else. So it's, how do you apply that,
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's like the person who was giving the prophecy thought they were being very precise and simple about it. And you're like, I have no idea what this, I have prophecies in my book. So like yeah.
I do love a good prophecy trope. It's good.
I do too. And it's fun. It's fun. It's fun creating them. I like when it's the person who created the prophecy thought they were being very clear and descriptive about what it is you need to do. They were not trying to put it in flowery language just for the hell of it. They were not trying to trick you. They were trying to be straightforward about it and describe it the best way that they could. And in several hundred years down the line, you're like, I have no idea what this even means.
Yeah.
Because things change.
Yeah, straightforward speech, even a few hundred years ago is not the same now. So
that's it. And governments and things change, and the words that we use for them change. So what they would have called, they may have said, something about a king, and we're like, well, we don't have a king. What do they mean?
What are you talking about? Yeah.
That's it. Like, we don't. They were using the analogs that they had at the time, and we may not have those things in our time. And be like, I don't know how you talking about the president? Like, I don't think so. That's not quite kingly.
No. So then you're like, is it a metaphorical king? It's, how would you...
That's it.
So
then it becomes your interpretation. And then for the prophecy to work, how close do you have to get to what the original thing was?
Yeah.
That can be a lot of fun too.
It is. Then what happens if you get it wrong? And, or even if I have another sort of story that I'm working on, which is a similar sort of, like the prophecy trope is in it as well in a different way, and that is that multiple factions have interpreted it very differently and are basically going to war over that. How they're going to.
That's another possibility. And does the prophecy, do you have other chances? If you get it wrong, can you just keep trying, or is it nope, whoops, one try and you're out?
Yeah. And then ultimately it all comes down to, to what extent is it actually going to happen when, this time comes to pass. If that's like, this one is sort of to do with the end times, and, is it accurate? That's
true. That's true. And sometimes the person who created the prophecy was deliberately trying to be obtuse because they didn't want there's somebody else that they did not want to figure it out. So they were trying to be just vague enough so that person wouldn't get it. Someone who is contemporary with them who would be able to unravel it pretty quickly. And so someone a few hundred years down the line is like, I have no idea what this
is. It's just a riddle.
Yeah. I have one of those because they did not want this other person who was contemporary with them who would have figured it out immediately if they hadn't been a bit vague. My poor main character's like, I have no idea what this is and what you want, and I don't want to be a part of it anyway, so.
That does sound like fun.
Yeah, but I need him to actually do it, so.
Yeah, then you need to start. So I really am resisting, because I have this kind of magic that is space-time magic to some extent, and I'm like, it's so tempting to try to do time stuff, and I really don't want to go down the time travel path because, oh my goodness, it's hard enough just plotting in a linear fashion. But I did a trilogy where they forced me to do some time. I'm breaking time magic so we can never do this again. It was too hard to plot. It was too complicated. And it crossed over events in other book series. I was like, no, we're never doing this again. This is it. This is your one time travel thing, and that's it. Then I'm destroying the magic so you can't do this. So I don't want to plot it. Yeah. And this is like, I'm basically working on series and also other series that are all connected into the same universe.
Same.
So the prophecy I was talking about where these factions have gone to war, it is essentially the same prophecy. And I have another, it's a novella at this stage, and I kind of, if it stays novella size, I can probably manage the time travel element of it, but it is a character who kind of figures out a loophole that he can maybe go back in or forward in time and leave clues to help them solve this unsolvable prophecy riddle. So
But how does this person know that they've got the right answer and that they're going to leave the right
Well,
clues?
they don't. so, so maybe yeah. I bet that is not technically necessarily canon yet. So if it's
But that could be fun, especially if some of the clues are wrong and they don't realize it. They're certain they have the right interpretation. But if they know how to, if they want to leave clues because they think they've solved the riddle, why don't they just bring about the prophecy?
in this case, it's a character who is not human and therefore has some restrictions on what they can do.
But if they found a loophole, I would think they'd find one around that too.
Maybe
They could just get a human.
Yeah, it might change too much. I don't know how that particular part of the story will go, and if it might just be something that sits quietly in the background that I don't continue with. I don't know. I have plenty of writing still to do, finishing Lightless. So
No, it's cool. I like that I like the sci fantasy aspect of it. It sounds neat, especially since it starts contemporary and it rises up to that. You're not thrown into the sci fantasy from the get go and trying to figure it all out and understand it, because that I have trouble with when you walk into a science fantasy and it feels too sci-fi, but then there's magic, and then I'm like, I can't disconnect I can't like just can't do that.
it's a lot.
Just can't buy that.
The suspension of disbelief is huge, and also the learning curve is so steep with that sort of stuff. It's so it's really hard. Like, it gets really dense really quickly.
But I think, but if you start from our world and you see the evolution into it, I feel like that's, I don't know. For me as a reader, I feel like that is a better entry into the science fantasy type book than just jumping in from chapter 1 and there's spaceships and magic is running it, because then you see how they got from here to there, because that's always the thing that I can never figure out is how did you get from our contemporary society to spaceships running on magic when we are very much a science-based society. But it's so you having to do that evolution had to figure that out. How did we go from one to the other? And, is it the whole world, or is the whole world still, NASA and other agencies going purely by science trying to get into space travel, and we, the small group, are just doing the magic thing and not trying to do Star Trek with magic.
Yeah, that is sort of where it's going at the moment, I think. But I like it in the sense that, like you say, it starts urban, it starts very relatable, very grounded, and then you're going to explore this whole universe basically from the point of view of a person who grew up in a contemporary Earth-based city. So everything, you sort of have a lot of useful analogies and that kind of stuff, and that you can draw on what we see every day when we walk outside, rather than being in a completely alien world right from the beginning. So.
And what happens when she starts using magic? Does that disrupt technology?
So she does eventually travel to other worlds and sort of figures out starts to learn how to use some of the magic, and with varying levels of success so far. But and they're still trying to, because of the nature of Darkhaven and it being a very secretive organization, and they can't really expose themselves at risk of kind of being hunted. They can't take this out to the broader public, even if they wanted to. So
I like that. I like that it's a select, smaller group that is engaging in this, trying to solve this prophecy, and it's not like a worldwide. Because that's where like the logic breaks down for me, is like a worldwide society that is powered by magic. I can't suspend my disbelief that far.
Yeah.
But a secret organization where there's a limited number of people and they can't. Like the way you're doing that, I can totally believe, because the rest of the, because then it is just this group that is using magic and doing those things for their reasons. But yeah, that I can buy. But like a worldwide system of science and magic getting along and people using magic to teleport places, I can't buy that.
It just, I think I briefly thought about going that way because I wrote the third book three times completely before I kind of figured out where I was going, and then decided I need to become a plotter. But it's I did initially kind of break it to the public, and the repercussions is huge. And I'm like, this is a difference. Like, you could do it maybe, like there would, you could maybe make something that goes in that direction, but it's a completely different story to what I wanted to tell, and it totally derailed the prophecy line. And it would just need so much attention, like you say, to make it believable in terms of exploring those repercussions. You're essentially writing an alternative universe then.
And you'd have to deal with the politics and stuff, which is not fun.
Yeah. And especially if it's global, it's huge. So
yeah.
And these days, like, given that it's contemporary, it's sort of set in a world that is extremely interconnected. You're not going to hide anything like that happening. So
that's the thing. So and the fact that it's Darkhaven is a secretive hidden organization, like, that makes it cool, there's these select people who are working on these things that they can't tell the rest of the world, and that secret is compelling reading, because then it's like they have to protect that secret, and you have and I don't know, I just feel like that works with the prophecy better, the way you're doing it. Like, you wouldn't be able to do the prophecy because everything else would overshadow it if the whole world found out, and then would the world even accept magic? Because science has done some pretty neat things. I mean, I'm still waiting for my AI kitchen that cooks for me and shops for me. But I just tell it what I want.
That'd be so good. It's definitely raises a lot of questions, and it's an interesting things to think about. But ultimately, you can only do so much in one book or one series, even, and so you just kind of have to go, here's what I'm focusing on for this one, and
and like, I don't think the world would react well to finding out about magic, and it's because we've become so dependent on technology. And if you need to have undergone this experiment to have gotten, and that experiment is shut down, then other people can't get it. There's like a scarcity. Like, I think that just plays more into them keeping it quiet, because there's a limited amount of people who have access to this magic. It's not something everybody can get.
Yeah, it's sort of very much like, I suppose it's that kind of X-Men thing of, like, you're going to be exploited if that becomes public, so which was the original intent of the program. It was in the story, it was originally a military program that didn't work, and so they were going to make people superhuman to exploit them, and that didn't happen the way they wanted it to, so they tried to shut it down, and that's how we sort of end up with Darkhaven being the results of that experiment, trying to just get by, really, and continue living their lives as best they can initially, and then the prophecy sort of starts to fall into place, and that becomes their goal.
No, that makes sense. It makes sense that then, and who doesn't want to live like a normal life? I always love the X-Men.
Me too.
It makes sense if you look at the geopolitics of, like, the last 50 decades. Like, there were plenty of superhuman experiments, I'm sure, during the Cold War and at other various points in the last 50 years, because there's not been the geopolitical situation has not been fantastic, and everybody is looking for an edge in case of World War III, which we hope won't happen. But looking at the news lately, it seems like we are teetering closer to the edge of that. I hope it won't happen. But so it totally makes sense that they were looking for some superhuman soldiers program to exploit. Every country who has the means has probably been looking into that.
Yeah. So that was the original sort of story idea, I suppose, was, it was that conspiracy, which is another thing that I don't seem to escape from my stories. There's always a conspiracy, which is kind of what creates interesting conflict as well. So,
but if you look at our world, like, you just look at the news. How many conspiracies do you see mentioned? Like, I think it's part of the human condition to either suspect that there is a conspiracy or to invent one if there isn't one, to explain things.
Be involved in one.
because there's so many about so many different things. Every time I turn on the news, there's a conspiracy about something.
Yeah.
Or someone is accusing someone of being part of a conspiracy.
I mean, once again, our sort of economic and geopolitical systems lend themselves to it. So
Yes, we are
secrecy
distrustful. It's sad that we distrust people that we don't see as like us. And it seems like the definition of like us gets narrower and narrower every year.
It does. It really does. Yeah.
Like, we're all human beings. We all want the same things, broadly.
Yeah, and that theme roughly I did sort of try and bring into the overall story, in the sense of there are human civilizations across the stars, basically, and ultimately they're all the same people. They're all people.
How did they get there? They
That's
were
where they
created.
started. Earth is one of the newer ones.
Oh, okay. And we lost whatever technology they brought here.
So yeah, there are reasons that Earth does not have magic in it, or those sorts of means available to them.
Does it have anything to do with the Neanderthals?
I've tried not to dig too far into like sort of
Atlantis or the
changing
Neanderthals
history. Yeah,
or the Illuminati or any of the big conspiracies of the past.
I have kind of just skirted around that and gone, you can sort of fill in the gaps, in terms of, I don't really want to get sidetracked once again, because there's just so many rabbit holes you can go down with this sort of thing. Didn't want to get sidetracked with how do I rewrite history for this alternate interpretation of the world, but so it's sort of, I've glossed over that a little bit.
Or you don't. You just have something happen when they get here that wiped it out and left them in a caveman, or the way Anne McCaffrey did it, where technology erodes pretty rapidly and they end up losing all of that and becoming more simplistic, and because they can't fix the machines. They're missing some specialized equipment or materials. And as time goes on, they're less and less of the technology that they brought. They can't use it. They can't fix it. They don't have the materials it needs. So they end up having to find more primitive ways of doing things. And eventually society over the generations forgets that they ever had these other technologies. It sounds like magic to them because they've never seen it. They don't understand it. And it just goes on. And then you end up in a more like medieval kind of a situation.
Yeah. And so
you could do it that way,
really, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. It's something that the ship crash land. I think that's what it was in the Anne McCaffrey book. I don't remember which one it was, but it was a really cool book. I think the ship crash landed and that caused a problem.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But it's something that popped into my head and now it's gone.
And it was Perrin that they crashed on. And then they had, that stuff that comes down, the thread. And they had to hide from it. And so if you're in a war for survival, technology kind of becomes a luxury at that point.
It doesn't develop, does it? When you're,
not when you have to hide.
We've seen in history, when there's long periods of war, there's very little technological advancement. So,
yeah,
except perhaps for weaponry, but even that, it's like most of your development happens in times when you're not actively fighting. So
yeah.
I think also the other thing that I found fairly early on was just, I felt initially like I had to answer every single one of those questions and have a cohesive, sensible answer for it too.
Right.
And as I went on, I was like, actually, no, we don't even agree on our history over, the course of the last few thousand years, really. It's sort of, there's a lot of gaps and inconsistencies in that much. And you go beyond when we've had like written records, then it's impossible to know. And if you're spanning then across galaxies and civilizations that have been around for billions of years, well, of course, some of the things are going to get misremembered or lost or forgotten. It's kind of nice to have inconsistencies when you're playing with that.
There should be, and they could always have crash landed, lost communication with the other places for some reason. Who knows? Blame it on the lecture, because the environment was very different. 100 years ago, and even more different 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. they had ice ages, and like they may have landed when life was hostile here and had other things to do than preserving their magic or their technology. They may have just needed to survive.
Yeah.
You know? And so yeah, I mean that, and sometimes the simplest solution is the best one.
Yeah, I'm finding that more and more. I'm like, actually, sometimes the simplest it's either the very simple answer or it's we don't know. It's like,
Yeah.
So Charon, the god of lightning, he sort of tells his version of events and he pretends to know. But as I'm going further into the series, I'm finding that actually he's been wrong, and or he just didn't know. He had his version of events, but what he was taught in his history classes, but they're not necessarily accurate. So.
And he wasn't alive and watching when these things happened. So
No.
yeah,
he's come into this very recently.
Yeah, and history only remembers the victor. So, like, not necessarily, like, the truth. It's whatever the victors say happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Is much of what history is.
So if there's any sort of conflict, but, only the victors survived it, well, you're not going to know even that there was a conflict if it's been that far back in history.
Or you'll know there was a conflict, but not why, who started it, what was going on. You'll just know the outcome because that's all the victor recorded. And they make the other side sound like the enemy when we don't know. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. Maybe they were just living their life. So you mentioned that this is a series, that there's 6 books, a couple of novellas.
Yeah,
3 books in
6
this.
books. 6 books planned, 3 of them are out so far.
Okay.
So the 3rd book came out last year. And
When
I have a few novellas. There's a prequel novella already out as a sign up to my newsletter freebie, called "Who Will Hold the Universe," which is a very strange story about a school ball and a circus that gets commissioned to perform at it. So, and that features Gabby and one of her friends as a point of view character as well.
That's cool. And you're working on book 4 right now?
I am working on book 4 alongside other projects. So my other major project at the moment is a trilogy. So I'm going to write a trilogy, and it will be a trilogy, and it is, which is amazing. And that's a kind of gaslamp fantasy, but it's still set in the same universe. So it's another world, kind of in another galaxy, essentially. But it's set entirely on that world. You don't really go, there's no exploration of anything beyond it. And that is about actually someone who Charon knows. So the characters are connected. There's a tiny bit of crossover. Yeah, it's a gaslamp romantic fantasy with an exiled spy and a disgraced magician trying to solve an art crime that turns out to be a rather deadly mystery. So.
Oh, wow.
So I'm planning to do a Kickstarter for an illustrated version of that, probably mid this year, hopefully.
Okay.
So that's sort of taken priority at the moment.
Okay, and then you'll be back to writing
and then
book
I'll go
4.
back to Soul Shards, which is book 4. So, and yeah, partly because an urban sort of fantasy, YA urban fantasy that turns into magical space opera turns out to be really hard to explain to people in categorizing on retailer terms, in putting it into genres and so forth. It just doesn't fit very well. So I was like, I would really like to have something that I can just say, here's what it is in half a sentence and it makes sense.
Right.
So that's why I started working on this Gaslamp project, but it is tied into the same world. There is some crossover of characters, so there's a connection there. And then for some bizarre reason, I decided, you know what, I could maybe illustrate this. So
I
see how
did
that goes.
the same for a trilogy that I'm finishing. So I can neither explain. I can't explain why I decided to do that either. So I feel your confusion.
Glad I'm not the only one. It's just like, you know what will get me really excited about this? I'm going to illustrate it. And then the next day I'm like, why?
Yeah. I just really wanted, I see all these beautiful books on Kickstarter, and I really wanted a beautiful book. And I didn't know if I'd fund high enough or get enough backers for the physical books to be able to do a print run to get the really fancy, beautiful books. So I was like, let's just make it as fancy as we can and still print it through print on demand. So then it doesn't matter if 5 people want it or not. Yeah. I get the pretty edition because that's what I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my plan is much the same. Is print on demand, but it'll have the illustrations in it and
Because
whatever
then we're
else I
doing it
can
for us. We
manage.
want a pretty book, of ours,
Yeah.
and we could wait, years and hope that we get loads and loads of fans who want physical books so we could do a print run. Or we could do it now and just do it print on demand. And then even if it's only 5 people, they get a really special, beautiful book, and so do we.
And it's
To me,
getting like
that's
there are
worth
more
it.
and more. I agree, it is, and there are more and more options becoming available for print on demand. So
Yeah,
printers coming in.
I feel like because we keep asking and we want this and we're like, hey, it's great that you can do this on a print run, but I would need $10,000 for that and 250 customers who want copies and don't have that. So
Yeah.
I like that we're challenging the print on demand companies, and some of them are rising to it and making options for us.
Yes, I like that too. And I would like to do a special edition of Darkhaven, but I would prefer to wait till the series is finished to do that. So that was my other thinking of come up with a fairly short for me, 3 books, and it's done, and it's
Yeah.
connected to. So it's another into the universe. So which I call the Tarnan verse, and it is So either Darkhaven or this trilogy could be entry points.
That's cool.
So.
And you said there's only a light connection between them.
Relatively. So because the other reason for doing this now, other than kind of wanting to explore, basically seeing all the pretty books everyone's making, going, I'd like to make a pretty book.
Yeah.
Other than
I want
that,
the foiling and the edges, but
yeah.
I can't get that right now. That's not a print on demand thing.
It isn't. My other thinking is that once we get to the end of the Lightless Prophecy series, so the 5th and 6th books especially, the plot starts to involve some other characters, and I wanted to explore their stories before they get into that ending. So I know, because the Lightless Prophecy kind of is a pretty massive conclusion, so I wanted to know what I was dealing with going into that in terms of what characters I have available and what their backgrounds are and so forth. So this explores
And their
background of
personalities, like, are they going to go along with the plot that I'm thinking of, or are they going to fight against it? Am I going to have to alter it in some way? Well, you still have time and books left to alter it if necessary.
Yeah.
Because characters have personalities, and we can't always make them do things for plot reasons.
Can't make them do anything. I had one that was like, I'm like, right, well, you need to, work needs doing, off you go, adventure, it was some sort of dangerous mission he was supposed to go on. He's like, you know what, I'm going to go home and drink whiskey and pat my cat. And I was like, no. But he did. He went home and spent the evening sitting by the fire with his cat drinking whiskey. So, fine. He's not the one, is he?
No. I've had similar.
Lovely guy, though.
Yeah, I had this guy. He was like, yeah, I'll do this. And then he gets halfway into it. And he's like, this isn't fun anymore. I don't want to do this. So I had to find another character who could like bribe him or like offer him what he really wants an army to command. So she offered him an army. If you will go do this thing for plot reasons, I will give you an army. And so through the entire trilogy, he's trying to get that army he's an ex-war god. So he wants to command an army. Sense. So that's the carrot that other characters keep holding over his head. And my playmater was saying, she's like, I really enjoy this. And all he wants is an army to lead, and he just can't get it.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
Instead, he's going to have to save the world by accident. And then maybe he'll get an army to lead.
That's so much more real, though, isn't it? Like, how many people out there are just going, my goal in life is to save the world, and that's the only motivation they need. But
yes. And then because some other characters made friends with him, they're like, well, I guess we're going to have to help him.
Choose your friends wisely.
Yeah, and he ends up having his own little army of friends, but that's not enough for him. So we'll see. Yeah, that's in the trilogy I'm working on now. So it was kind of fun having as a lead character, sort of gray character who has no interest in saving the world really, and until his own existence is threatened by it, and then he's like, okay, I have to get involved now.
Yeah.
Not just about because I want an army to lead and there won't be one, but I will cease to exist, and I really don't want that. I'm not ready for that.
Definitely won't get to lead an army if you cease to exist. Yeah.
That's it. That's when he's like, okay, maybe I need to take some extra action here, because it's not, it's not getting done. The world isn't getting saved, and I need to get involved, even though I don't want to. I don't want to cease existing more than I don't want to get involved. So I'm gonna have to.
Pretty good motivator.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So I'm trying to keep it to a trilogy though, and some of the characters are really fun. They're gonna have to come back in something else. They're just too fun. I don't want to let go of them.
That's what I'm finding, and even like finishing the trilogy, like I'm literally writing the last scene at the moment, and it's of the third book, and it has been the third book. It looked like it might try and make itself into 2 books, but it's just a bit of a longer third book, and it's quite sad finishing a series. You're like, even knowing that some of these characters will come back in other series, and they'll make an appearance at the end of Lightless, it's like there won't be any more of this feeling that they have with this particular group. So I was surprised. I sort of thought it would be more satisfying, but it's actually quite upsetting. So.
Yeah. Then you're like, maybe we'll do a sequel series for them. Yeah. I'm not ready to let go of them. There's more they could do. There's more drama. There's more things that are screwed up in the world that we could find some reason for them to get involved in.
Exactly.
Whether they want to or not is irrelevant.
Yep. Yeah, they think they're happy now.
I think they'd be happier having to save the world again.
Sure.
But this has been fantastic. Is there anything else you want to say about Darkhaven or the Lightless Prophecy or the Gaslamp trilogy, which hopefully we'll come back and talk about?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, you're invited.
Yeah, I'm quite excited about that one, just because it's part of it also is, so art is a big theme in most of my books, and I don't, even in Gabby is very much not an artist, sort of, or a photographer or dancer or creative in any way, so she says, and she has, she has a friend who is very much the kind of multi-passionate artist, and so she's not so much into that sort of thing, but as the series goes on, other characters get involved. So that was another thing. It starts out in first person, single point of view, and then in book 3, the reason I had to write it 3 times is because it just didn't work in that format. So I had to bring other characters in. And one of those, she dances as a hobby, so that becomes an important thing later on. So I bring a lot of art and kind of that feeling into it, I suppose, and I paint myself. And so the secrets we save is the first book in the new trilogy, and I really wanted it to have a feeling that I could actually paint. So that was the original idea for it, was what can I do that would be set in a, so it's like kind of a city that's full of gardens and flowers and things that I can illustrate. So
that's cool.
Rather than when I was working on Lightless, it's like, yes, I paint, but not in any style that makes sense for this book. So
you're not going to paint the magic and
well, maybe, but yeah, painting Interstellar kind of saga is weird. But although the covers have some of my artwork incorporated into them, so
that's cool.
That's fun.
That's very cool. I think that's awesome when our authors are also artists or musicians or just other things that they can bring into their books and their whether it's the packaging or the interior in the story. I always think that's very cool.
Yeah, I've also got a serial that I'm working on, which is a retelling of Phantom of the Opera, and the great fun thing about that is I have a stage background, so I can really dig into a lot of that sort of behind the scenes technical stuff, which is a lot of fun. So
that's very cool. I love the Phantom of the Opera. I live in the New York City metro area, so I saw the Broadway show
Oh.
many times.
Yeah, you would
It
have
was
to.
one of my favorites. It was the first one that I saw when I was a teenager. They took us in high school. The theater teacher and I was in the high school band. They were
Mhm.
friends, and they decided, all the theater, band, orchestra kids, let's all go see a Broadway show for reasons. I don't know what they told
You
the
don't need
school, but they
reasons.
got the school to do it, and so we packed onto the buses. We went down to the city because it's only an hour
Mm.
from our high school to the city, and only because they have to obey traffic lights and things, they couldn't take like the highways. They had to drive all the way down Broadway, which was not fun in traffic.
Wow.
But yeah, and so we went to we saw Phantom of the Opera. Tickets were like $40 or something because it was a school, so
Yeah.
we got a discounted rate.
Mhm.
And I've seen it quite a few times. I saw it in college and a few times, and I saw it outside of college. A job that I had in the city had some kind of perks. You could get discount theater tickets, so I did that.
Yeah,
If
that
you're
would
in
be
the New York
amazing.
metro area, if you
Mm.
you that is like our pastime, is hunting down like discounted tickets to things, and finding. There was the skit. I forget which comedian has it for Thanksgiving Day, that like New Yorkers like try to find somebody who has a connection to somebody who lives on Central Park. I forget, from Central Park West or whatever, to see the parade from someone's apartment, and that is very true. It's
Yeah, that
very
would be
true.
amazing. I for my 21st birthday, in lieu of doing a party or anything, I got my mum and my brother and was like, I want to see Phantom of the Opera on stage. So we flew over to Sydney for it because I live on the west coast of Australia. So, and at the time was in a small regional town. Like there's no shows there. So yeah, we flew over to Sydney for the weekend and saw Phantom of the Opera, which was amazing. So it's
Yeah, it's
very
one of
much
my
a passion
favorites.
project.
I like that one and Les Mis. Those are the
Yes.
two that I've seen the most. Um, Les Mis is just amazing because I've actually read the book. I read Phantom of the Opera too, but the play and the book follow, or they're it. You can they didn't have to do as much um picking and choosing. Les Mis is huge, and
Yeah.
there's like long discursus where he goes off on like the Catholic Church and other things that have nothing to do with the story, and for many chapters, hundreds of at least some, and so in one case, over 100 pages, you do not see any of the characters.
Wow.
You don't, so like putting that together into a coherent screenplay, and he's also covering like quite a bit of time. Like the actual book of Les Mis like covers like 20, I think it's like 20 or 30 years of what's going on in France. Um, and there's a ton of characters. You're not just in Jean Valjean's point of view. You're in many other characters' points of view. Like I think
Mm.
there's a ton of, yeah. So reading it is like, the book is completely different from the show. The show took like the story that, because there's multiple stories that it tells in there because there's so many points of view. And it just told the story of Jean Valjean and pulled in only the things that related to his story. And there's so much it leaves out. Yeah. So like I think that's why I like Phantom of the Opera too, but like Les Mis, like having like tried to read the original work, like it's a Herculean effort that they went
Oh
through to
yeah.
put this together. Like
Mhm.
all that stuff does happen. It's slightly different in the book, but like finding it within, like, it's huge, the Les Mis book,
Yeah.
in all of that, and how they, like, I just think it's amazing every time I see it how they read this whole thing and figured out what to pick out of it. So it's still true to it, but
Mm.
it cuts out all the things that, because he goes off on long rants about things, the
Yeah. Yeah.
aristocracy and other things.
Mm. And you do get that vibe from the play, though,
Yes.
like from the show. I find the musical.
Mm-hmm. which I
Yeah,
think is so amazing, is they got some of his viewpoint in
mm,
there, and it's still a really good story.
it is. Yeah, Les Mis would be like, if you had to say, pick your favorite musical, it would have to be Les Mis, just because that was the first one I worked on in a theater. So, um, yeah, it was
And it's such a
quite
great
a.
story. The
It is.
redemption
Yeah,
arc,
yeah.
the the little girl getting, found family, and then them running, and then she gets, the romance, and then there's the backdrop of the revolution, and
Yeah.
like it is fantastic.
Mm,
And the
yeah.
music, and I love family opera and I love the music, but it's like family opera is so much more a straightforward like love triangle. Well, no, it's more of a love angle because they both like the one
It's
girl. If they liked each other too, it'd be a triangle.
yeah, I think that's how it works. Yeah. Yeah, it's, I suppose typical kind of what you'd expect. If you just said love triangle, it's three parties involved somehow. I suppose that is what it is. But yeah, it's I really enjoyed The Phantom as a book.
No, yeah, yeah.
Like,
Oh
a
yeah,
lot of
me too.
fun.
It's beautiful.
So much funnier than I expected it to be. There's this sort of irreverent humor to it that I did not expect based on what I'd seen on the stage.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There was definitely, but I thought that was more because of like just people, because a lot of the humor was them being backstage interacting with each other,
Mm,
and that's it felt like any break room in any like you know when you have a lot of like I worked in retail when I was in high school and college, and that's how it was in the break room. That sort of
yeah.
camaraderie and light comedy, like lightly poking fun at things, and that's what it felt like, where the humor and stuff came in there, because like they were coming in from the show, but like they were all kind of young people, and
Mm,
I mean there was some older folks, but like it seemed like the cast of the it, because they're putting on a play within the play, and that the cast of the play within the play were all young people, and they're
mm,
all roughly similar cast of society. So, and they're spending a long time rehearsing and working together. Of course they're gonna like bond and poke fun at each other and have a laugh and goof off.
yeah.
I'm
I
sure
like
that's
seeing that on page though. It's like that's
yeah,
something that I find is a lot of fun to read, and
fun to
especially
write.
yeah, oh, hugely. And I feel like any sometimes stories like when people get too caught up in action, that sort of that's what it's missing. Um, yeah, it's that interaction and just having those moments where actually maybe the plot is not necessarily moving forward right now, but the character building is huge. And they're those little things that are said and done that can pay off along like further down the track.
Yes, yeah, no, I totally agree. I totally agree. Um, this has been fantastic.
It
I
has.
don't.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I know
I'm
I've
so
taken
glad we
up.
got to.
Oh, go. I'm sorry.
No, I'm so glad we got to talk about musical theatre at the end. That was a lot of fun.
Yes, I love Broadway shows. I've seen. I wouldn't say a. Actually, maybe I have seen a lot. I'm not sure. I've, um, I've seen some that were never made it out of previews just because the tickets were inexpensive, and I was going to be in
Mm.
the city anyways for work, so I was like, why not? Only young ones. I don't need that much sleep,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, that was a time.
Yeah, because like by the time the show ends and you get out of the theater and get back to Mass Transit, and then because I didn't live in the
Mm.
city, I had to get out of the city and get back home. I get home at like 12, 1 o'clock in the morning to then turn around and go back
Yeah,
to work the next day and be, all that rigmarole. It was exhausting, but it was worth
mm.
it.
Yeah.
No regrets,
Same.
especially now that the ticket prices are like twice what I was paying before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Things are now $100 or $200 that
Wow.
I used to get for like 50 or $60.
Yeah, that changes the entertainment budget a bit.
Yeah, so I haven't seen one since the pandemic. So a little sad about that.
That is
But
sad.
but yeah, it's very yeah. But everything, everything gets more expensive every year.
It does.
So
That is true.
there's So I guess maybe I should go now because 10 years from now they'll be even more expensive. Did you have
Yeah,
to say like the funniest, best show that I saw was The Producers on Broadway? It is exactly like the movie.
right. I don't think I've seen it. It's
Yeah, rent the movie. It is the Broadway show and the movie are exactly the same.
I'll have to look it. Yeah, I'll look it up.
It's just the staging is a little different because it's a little they can't do it's the yeah there's certain things that are you wouldn't having because there's a number of different settings in there, so in the movie they could be a little more they could show more of the setting.
Yeah.
In the show it was more suggested, but it was just amazing how they did it with the lights and things.
I do love watching that sort of stuff.
Yeah, but it's just so the story and The Producers is they realize that they can make more money from a flop than from a success. So they set out to get the worst script, so they just set out to get the absolute worst actors, script, everything, figuring that it'll bomb and they'll make tons of money. Because they're cooking the book. So they're getting in all this money from investors and things for this show. And if it fails, they don't have to continue and they can just run away with the money. That's the plan. But and they promise everybody, oh, you can have a percentage of this and a percentage of that, not caring because it's going to be this horrible, failure. So they find this script about like this musical about Hitler, and they're like, this is perfect. This would be horrible. It would totally bomb. People will hate it. We will get laughed out. And it ends up but because they got the worst people they could find, it ended up people watching it ended up being a satire instead of this serious piece that the that praising Hitler that the person wrote it as, and so it ended up being a critical success and people loved it, and then the IRS is after them, all the people they promised stuff to, and it's just hilarious.
That would be very funny. I'll have to watch it.
Yeah, it's so funny because they set out to fail and instead they succeed. I think that says something too about life, that if you set out with no expectations, then anything that happens is amazing.
True.
So I do recommend if you get a chance to watch it. It is
I will.
absolutely hysterical. It is just I laughed. I was sore from laughing when I left the theater. It's just so ridiculous. Yeah, but thank you for coming, and I'm sorry we had technical problems this morning. Thanks for sticking in for that.
Thank you for getting through it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. We now found out that support is very supportive, so thank you for support. Yeah. I don't think you're listening.
Know if it ever happens again, that might be a fix.
Yeah, it's the echo cancellation. So just an FYI for anyone listening who also uses StreamYard, that can cause problems sometimes. So use it with care. So is there anything else you want to say about Gabby or Darkhaven or the Lightless Prophecy before we end?
I don't think so. It's if you're interested in sort of quirky young adult contemporary fantasy that ends up going to some very different places. It's ongoing series, but a lot of fun. So
I like ongoing series, so that makes me happy because there's always more books to look forward to, and that I don't know, I like that. I like knowing that there's a spot on the TBR permanently reserved for the series because there will be ebook every year somewhere in the year.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm one of those weird people. When I see something is completed, I'm less interested in reading it. There's not like a reason. There's not a next book coming out. Like it becomes, I'll read it later. Because it's done. It's not a living series, but something that has books constantly coming out, I'm more interested in because if I get it now, next year there'll be another book. There's something to look forward to. And when it's completed, there's nothing to look forward to. So every time I see those ads for completed book series, I'm like, maybe someday when all the other unfinished series I'm waiting for books in. I can throw you in, but I don't feel that time pressure. I don't know. Maybe I'm weird.
I think also with indie books as well, you've got more connection or opportunities for connection with the author. So that feels a little more alive, if that makes sense. I don't get the same sense of anticipation from some of the bigger trad names that I read, but Whereas there are some indie authors that I follow where, them putting out a new release is the most exciting thing that happens. So I find that a lot of fun.
No, that you might be right about that, because one of my favorite authors was traditionally published, but now they're indie, and I just saw a post the other day that the next book is coming out in the two series. One of my favorite authors is they write under the pen name Daniel Schaefer. It's the author's real name is Heather Schaefer, and their next book in the Daniel Faust series is coming out. I'm very excited, and the next book in the Harmony Black series will be coming in audio, hopefully this summer. So I am like beyond excited. As I know, for indie authors to make an audiobook is like, it's a lot of expense and hassle and risk, and the fact that the author is continuing with that, even though like they started being traditionally published and everything, but it is continuing that even though they're sort of transitioned into like more indie publishing. It's like, I'm so happy that they just didn't let these series that I've fallen in love with years ago like die, that they are continuing with them. So I commented on their Facebook post and was like, I'm so excited, and they wrote back, and I was so flyingly happy for like the entire day. It was like, I heard from one of my favorite authors. Such a fangirl, I know.
It is really exciting, I think, in that space, with some trad authors moving more into indie as well. I'm seeing it with some other, like Maria V. Snyder I've sort of read like a lot of her books, and she's always been brilliant with her fans, but she has indie published a couple of volumes.
She did?
Now.
I didn't know about that.
An alternative point of view, so Valak's point of view of Poison Study.
I have to go get that immediately.
The publisher didn't want it.
Cancel all plans. I need that book. I've wanted his perspective on Poison Study for like, I think I've read Poison Study not long after it came out. I have wanted his perspective since then, whatever year that was.
That's a while, yeah. I read it ages ago, yeah. The original trilogy.
I always liked him better than the FMC. I'm sorry, Maria.
Yes, I know, yeah.
I didn't, especially, I don't know if you read the Stormglass and the...
I did, yes.
I liked them until she chose the other guy who tortured her, and then I was like, okay, I don't think I could read anymore. The mental gymnastics that you had to go through to decide to be in some kind of relationship with this person who tortured you is beyond my comprehension. I didn't understand it. It was like, it just seemed to me there was no point. And I'm sorry, listeners, that we're arguing at a book that you probably haven't read. This is important.
I really struggle with that choice too.
We're taking our author hats off, and we're now readers, and we're going to talk about books.
I struggled with that one as well for the same reason. But I have always that, and I am quite careful to screen for it these days. I don't much like the sort of Stockholm syndrome vibe, or
me either.
She falls in love with her captor kind of thing. Like, I can be convinced, but it's got to be some pretty clever twist on it for it to work for me. So.
I just can't. I can't see a reason, like, unless you specifically went to them to get something, whatever, and then they took you captive because they didn't quite know, they're holding you there because they didn't quite know. That maybe I could see, because like they didn't kidnap you or anything. You went there to get something, and then they detained you, and like it's a different sort of vibe. You're there for a reason. Like, I don't think there'd be the Stockholm syndrome then, because you are there to get something from them. There was another fantasy series that I read like that they like, she wasn't their prisoner, like she was just detained, and then they were having some problems on their border, and then she's like, look, you can keep me detained or you can let me help. I came here to get something from you, like, let's make a deal. And like that I was okay with, because she was never really their captive. She was just kind of detained because they didn't quite know what to do with her. This foreigner shows up. That's supposed to be able to, nobody's supposed to be able to find them, or nobody's supposed to know they exist. And yet here is this stranger demanding things. Yeah. Of course they're going to detain her. Like, what else are you going to do? You know? They don't quite know what to do with this person. So...
Yeah, that's fine. It's more the captured and tortured kind of thing.
Yeah, she was never tortured.
Yeah.
They just didn't quite know what to do with her. So they lived in tree houses. So they like, here, you just stay in this tree house for a while we figure out what to do with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
And she had a magical horse. So like she could have escaped at any
Cool.
time. A magical talking horse. The horse only
Even
talked
better.
telepathically. So
Do you like a magical horse?
yeah. So I mean, like she was never really captured or anything. She was
No.
she was just detained, but she needed to be there anyways because she wanted something from them. So she was a
that
foreign
makes sense.
princess too, and she's like, "Look, I can solve your problems, and you can help me solve my problems, and it's all good." I think that's the
But
only
when
way I could do that. They're just detained because they're suspicious of them, but they're not
Like, if there's
actually captured. There's no torture.
Yeah, if it's like if there's political things going on, then fine. But yeah, it's the physical torture is a bit hard to get past.
I could not understand why, like, even as I was reading it, like her mental gymnastics made no sense to me. I was like, I don't understand why you wouldn't go for the, like, the whole time I was screaming at her, like, no, go for the other one.
Yeah. Same.
I haven't really read anything of hers since then. Like, I like kind of couldn't forgive her for that.
I went on and read all the Chronicles of Ixia, so there's more books with that more about Yelena and Balak.
Okay, I like Yelena.
Yeah, I like her too.
I didn't like her at first, but then I did like her. But I think, but the situation she was in book one was like really difficult. Like,
It was miserable.
yeah, it was really, it wasn't her fault. So I did not hold it against her. Like, she was in a bad situation. And then once she got out of that, I was like, I like you much better. So
Yeah.
it wasn't you, it was a situation. I'll forgive you.
Yes.
You know, but I liked that she was like very strong willed and tough. Yeah. I don't know. All right. We're just gabbing on.
Yeah,
So
we are.
we could keep going on about fantasy books forever. So
Yeah.
we'll stop now. And I have some books to go look up and get for my
Yes.
birthday. So
Good plan.
yeah. So thank you, Kel E Fox, for coming on here talking about Darkhaven, the Lightless Prophecy, Maria telling me that Maria B. Snyder has a book about Balak's point of view, which I didn't know about.
The publisher didn't want it. That's just wild. Anyway.
I mean, the publisher didn't want Lord of the Rings either, which boggles my mind. I mean, how could you say no to Tom Bombadil? I mean,
Yeah.
and Frodo and Sam, like, I don't.
Gandalf.
Did they not fall instantly in love with Aragorn? Like, how was that? Like, just my brain can't compute that. Like,
No.
how did you not instantly love this? Yeah, there's all the poetry and stuff, but that's Aragorn
Yeah.
and Sam.
Yes.
Like,
Merry and Pippin.
I just don't understand anybody could read that and not like fall like in love with it. I don't know.
Publishing. It's its own
But then
thing.
again, I saw the movies before I ever read the books, so that probably colors my interpretation of it because I didn't know the books existed until the movies came out in 2001.
Yeah, same. Well, I watched the first movie and then I was like, I must read this book. So I went to read the book.
That's it. I saw it with my friend in college, and we immediately like that was the thing we had to do because we just left. Our sophomores in college, I think. We just left. We had just finished the winter term, and so I spent all of winter break reading The Lord of the Rings. So I was like, I must know what happens. I'm not waiting a freaking year till the next movie comes out. I'm still going to watch the next movie, but I'm not waiting a year to find out what happens to them. I'm reading them. Yeah. So I did. I read it in a week from cover to cover. And yeah. So yeah, that probably colored my impressions of it because I had already seen the movie and I'm picturing Viggo Mortensen as Aragorn.
Yeah.
You know,
Aragorn.
Elijah Wood as Frodo and all the others. So, yeah. Okay. Anyways, we've been trying to end the podcast for like 4 times now.
It's just so many books to talk about. All right.
I know. Okay. Thank you all for listening. This has been Kel E Fox we talked about the Lightless Prophecy and Darkhaven and many other things. I'm Melinda Kucsera, your indie fantasy author, and I will see you, or speak to you, as it may be, next week when we have another author on the podcast to talk about another fantasy book. Have a great day or great night wherever you are. We are officially ending it this time. As soon as I find the button. There it is.